Well, today's episode came directly from questions that many of you have been asking. Why do I keep failing at diets? Why can't I stick to anything long term? And even what's wrong? Why can't I seem to lose weight and keep it off? I'm eating the same amount of food that I did years ago, and now all of a sudden I just can't keep the weight off. And, these are some important questions, and Dr. Laurel and myself today will begin to start answering these questions for you and show that there's really nothing wrong. It's about the changes that we're all going through. We're going to dive into traditional weight loss methods, and I'll give you a little spoiler alert. It's not because of willpower or discipline for that matter. Okay, so today we're going to unpack the science behind this and also give you some actionable steps that'll help you out. So, hello, Dr. Laurel. I'm glad you're here with us again today. And
Me too. And I'm on this journey with the rest of
I
us. We've
know
we
we're all
both hit that
there.
age.
We're there. So let's first start with, some why traditional weight loss methods fail. That's what I really want to talk about today. We'll follow with other things, but when we have that caloric restriction, that's one of the biggest pitfalls that we see, eating less and without considering when and how to eat really becomes a problem for all of us. And that chronic caloric restriction, which I hear all the time in my private practice, and you probably do in yours also, or the intermittent fasting, we'll talk about that today. Without doing things strategically and systematically, what happens is we change our metabolic rate, we actually sabotage ourselves. And let's get into some of that today because our bodies adjust to support us. What are some of your thoughts on that? The first pitfall is caloric restriction. What do you think about that? What's your opinion and what have you seen in your practice?
What I've seen personally is I have made a point of never doing anywhere close to extreme calorie restriction. Like
Yeah.
I've maybe, shaved off a few extra calories, but I have always tried to honor my metabolism and feed it, and avoid those really drastic cuts in calories. And because I didn't want to tell my body that I was in starvation mode. I didn't want it to think something dire like that was going on.
Well, what's interesting is we talked about metabolic adaptation, and I do that in my book, The Overnight Diet. And when we talk about metabolic adaptation, as you know, and you just alluded to that too, when the body goes into that mode of starvation, what happens is to support you. It's not that your body's not responding, it's actually is responding and saying, hey, I want to keep you healthy. So I'm going to slow down the metabolism. And that's what we're seeing. But we're also seeing something else with caloric restriction. The way I've always handled diet for the last, I still handle it the same way, but a little bit differently at this age. But changing maybe the food choices. So instead of eating my carbohydrates at night, like I used to be able to get away with, I can't do that now. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this caloric restriction is really not the way to go because it does change. And that's what we call about metabolic adaptation.
Yes, exactly. Our body thinks that we're starving and that it has to protect us by slowing down our ability to burn calories. And because our body likes these set points, and so it'll choose a new set point for our metabolism if we're not eating enough. So we have, it can be hard to find that balance of what's enough food for me, but
It's
well,
interesting you say that. In every book I've written over the last 4 decades, I have to say, I always said, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, but timing is crucial. Timing is easiest for anyone to change. If you want to diet, really talk about the timing of your food. And then I always go to quality of food. And the last thing is, and you just mentioned it, that's what triggered my mind to say this, is the quantity of food. I find that even in my life now is the most difficult to navigate. So I don't even address that. I address the first two. They're the three steps that I do when we talk
Yes,
about that. But let's
that
talk
is a
about just
great
the
point.
last thing so we can answer those questions. When we're talking about the role of willpower and the willpower fatigue syndrome. And that's also very interesting. Willpower has a finite existence. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's nearly a flat out myth. Not just,
I agree with you. I
I mean,
agree.
yes, we can do some things from willpower, but I
For
think
the
as
first
far as
24
diet,
hours.
yes, yes.
Yeah, that's what I find too. Willpower just doesn't happen. And I've always used this analogy if you play a guitar and you tighten the string or a string instrument, you keep tightening it and tightening it and tightening it, and what happens? It snaps. So willpower is really not the repressed feelings that we have to address when it comes to eating, and also the metabolic needs. Uh, you know, food is very interesting because we need to eat to survive. We need to nourish ourselves, and we have so many experts out there that they're telling us, I'm being sarcastic here a little bit. They're all telling us different things, what we should be doing. And people are going from one diet to the next diet to the next. And each time they do it, they're weakening their will actually because they're failing in their own mind. Actually, they're not. It's just the diet isn't appropriate for them. And diet is a very interesting topic to even discuss. So, how about you mentioned something once when we were having a discussion, also that willpower idea of suppressing our emotions and our real feelings causes stress. And what can you said something on a webinar that we did together, how stress, we start releasing cortisol, which then has even a compounding effect on it.
Yes, yes. Well, and yeah, I talk about this with my patients a lot because I am often recommending diet changes to my patients, not necessarily in terms of calorie restriction, but diet composition. But I'm always telling them, we're going to start slow. I do not want this diet change to stress you out because
Yeah.
we know we're all under so much stress already, and when we get that cortisol burst from stress, whether it is something like you're trying to comply with what I've told you to do, or that you're having trouble at work, whatever it is, when we have that cortisol response, it is sabotaging the other beneficial things that you are doing diet wise.
Even the people I know that call me with, they say, why is the intermittent fasting not working anymore? Well, they're first of all stressing their body. They're not doing it in a systematic way. And we'll talk about that on future or, episodes that we talk about. But when it's not a systematic way where the body is programmed for the circadian rhythms and things like that, it causes more stress and it supports what you're saying. So I put down some tips that we've talked about. Maybe we can go through them. What can people do when traditional weight loss diets fail? And the first is start with a maintenance baseline. So then that's what I do with people. I say, what are you eating now? Let's start with where you are. And as you said, with your patients that you see, you actually don't do anything extreme. We have to start, where are you now? Like, I want to know what you're doing and at what time you're doing it, not in any way to judge, but to say, okay, this is what you're doing. Now, how can we start working so that the mind is very, very potent here. How can we work so we can massage the mind? You don't want to just do that extreme and all of a sudden uh, you create problems. And I always use this as an example for over the years. When a man overeats, he says, I'm going to go out and run a few extra miles. When a woman overeats, she says, I'm never going to eat this again. I'm not eating tomorrow. it's I think it's still the same. I know in my mind works that way. Sometimes if I do something, I say, well, I better. I better cut out on that. Or we eat all our food because we're going to start our diet tomorrow. All these little things everybody goes through. So it's nothing to be ashamed of. So we want to do is start with a maintenance baseline. That's the first thing. And see where you are. Track yourself for 3 days. If you can't track yourself for 3 days, then you're not going to do a diet. And that's how I screen people. If somebody doesn't give me 3 days, that's it. I know that they're not serious. And why put them through that where the time and then they're going to feel failed? We just don't do that. The other one I have is, I say use systematic intermittent fasting. And that's the approach I use in my book, The Overnight Diet. Remember, a lot of the intermittent fasting that people are seeing on the outside are all done with men. Women and hormonal changes, estrogen changes, very different. And I have an extensive background in fasting. That's all my graduate work and my research and et cetera, has always been on fasting versus starvation and where we're going. So intermittent fasting must be done in a very systematic approach, not to upset the circadian rhythm of the natural way the body deals. So we must always be careful of that and do it in a systematic approach. For more information, again, I'm not pushing books here, but in the overnight diet, that's what I got tired after years and years of seeing this. And I did an overnight diet. I started I believe it was the early 90s or the 80s. I was talking about it. So you really want to be in a systematic way. And then the last one is build in a refeed day. And I put that in there, and I'd love to hear your opinion, Dr. Worrell, on the refeed day, where if you've done a little bit too low calories, like you said, I call it a mindset reset. We all have a reset or a set value. And that set value stays pretty tight. With exercise too, by the way, just with anything, we have a tolerance where then we just snap. Each person's a little different. So when we have that reset, so for example, if I'm dieting and I want to lose some weight or I don't want to put extra weight around my abdomen, especially midlife, because it's easy to put it on, very easy because of estrogen receptors. So what I do is if I find that I've eaten too little one day, I allow myself once a week to have, I don't want to say it this way to come off wrong, but a free for all.
Yeah.
If I want to do things and lay back a little bit, and I let myself do that 1 or sometimes 2 days a week. How do
Yes.
you think? What do you think about that? I mean,
Oh.
I find it so comforting to know I can, like, for example, I don't like to eat at night during the week, and then on weekends in a social way, I'll eat at night. And it depends. Don't take that as the gospel here. It's more, I vary things of how I do it. What do you think about that?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I always want a plan to be doable, something that someone can stick with. And I call it the cheat day. But yeah,
Okay.
having that day at least once a week can make a big difference. And maybe it is going to be, you pick it to be the day that you're going to go out with friends and eat at a restaurant so that you're not like, oh, what can I eat on this menu? Or, you can just relax and have fun with your food that day. And I mean, yeah, we're not going to go to extreme. We're not going to necessarily eat, 6 cinnamon rolls, but
I
we're
would,
just
though. I would. I love sugar. I love sweets. So yeah.
right. Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
it's funny you say that, but when I work with people and myself, and this is one of my first books that I wrote from Random House. I think it was Sexual Radiance. And by the way, it's not available right now. But I said, take the bowl, and I still say this, if you want to eat sweets, because I like the idea, have your cake and eat it too, eat the midday. So if I don't want to wait till the weekend, for example, or that one day that you call a cheat day, I call it
Mhm.
all is great day, whatever. What I'll do is I'll eat that dessert. I'll have everyone, and I have my clients do it too, eat at midday, not at
Mhm.
night. Eat at midday. So, for example, if I love bread, I'll eat it earlier on in the day. So these are the kind of things, all these little adjustments that, again, this is experience over the years. It's not something that I picked up on the internet, but it depends again. And as we said, it's the whole person, and you deal with the whole person as a naturopathic physician. So you're not just dealing with, oh, this is what they say, do this, do this. No, everybody's an individual, and you're an individual, those that are listening. You're unique. We have similar traits with our biochemistry, but right now, with the way the world is, there's such uniqueness on what we've had, what we've been exposed to, and even what our experience is.
Great
So
point.
that's really what I'd like to, what I really wanted to say. And is there anything else you want to add to, we've got a little bit off the subject, but I get very excited when we talk about any kind of metabolic changes, and mood and metabolism is my topic.
Yes.
And that's
I
why
just like
I'm,
to remind people one thing that can help us feel satisfied so that we're not trying to rely so much on willpower is making sure we're getting our protein in all three meals in sufficient quantities. And again, I'm not going to go to extremes,
sure.
the all protein diet with most of my patients. Some biochemical unique people might need that. For most people, it's just that moderate protein because our body has a set point need for protein, and if we are not meeting it, then our body's going to tell us to keep eating until we reach that set point. So make sure you're getting your protein so that you're not fighting your body.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when we did that webinar, together, and you had brought that up, I thought, wow, I never really put it together that way. So thank you for sharing that, because remember, protein is structural for us. And it's true. If I don't have, I've seen it with myself. I can keep eating the carbs all day until I fill up on and protein doesn't mean for vegans, for people who don't eat animal protein or anything from animals. There's still a way to get your amino acid sequencing and the protein that you need. So it's not that you have to go out and be a carnivore, for example. Everyone must be respected in their choices, but remember, what's choice for one is not food choice for another. So the three strategies that we discussed today, we're going to start with let's start with a maintenance protocol baseline, see where we are, gentle intermittent fasting, or actually structural, and then refeed days. You called them, I didn't call them refeed days, but or cheat days, whatever you want to say, or uh, comfort days, whatever you want to do. But look, we love to hear your comments, because that's where we're getting these questions from. So if today's tips and all resonate with you, or you have any changes that you're going through that you want to talk about or have us talk about, please send them to us. We'll put all the contacts in the show notes so that you can feel empowered. We want the community to grow, and we want the community to not be out there in cyberspace just getting inundated with information that might not necessarily be in your best interest. And if this episode was helpful, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe, because it's very helpful for us. And you don't know how well it would really help us and help the community build. And always remember, I like to say this, until we meet again, or until you hear us again, please stay happy, stay calm, and believe me, stay strong. And we'll all stick together. And that's our mission for the rest of the day. Take care, everyone.